Welcome back to Telltale, another of our videos. Reviewing this time, we're getting back into Philip K. Dick. We're well out of the...
We needed more Dick.
Yeah. We're well out of the Halloween and back into PKD and on track for moving on. We're still stuck in June of 1953. The man
He just
published...
can't stop. The man's a machine.
I think he put a story in every
Cranking him
existing
out.
science fiction magazine
Frickin'
that
machine.
month.
He's like Rihanna with music, where she's just throwing out albums every 5 minutes. Goodness gracious.
But the amazing thing is the quality of these stories.
Yes, they're fantastic.
Having been written so many in so short a time. I mean, we're not even a year into his career yet.
No.
And
Frickin'
we've had
blowing
so
our
many
minds.
top tales coming out of this guy. And this one you may have heard of, even if you haven't read the story. It was made into a movie not long ago with Ben Affleck and was a pretty big Hollywood picture. It is Paycheck. And yes, the movie is different, but the movie, I feel, really captured a lot of the spirit of the story.
Excellent.
And so the story was published, I believe, in Imagination Science Fiction in June of 1953.
Yep.
And do you want to do some synopsis, or should I take a stab at it?
Go ahead and take a stab at it.
Okay,
This one
I'll
was
take a
pretty.
stab at it.
This is a top tale as far as I'm concerned, so
This
go
man
for it.
was hired by this company. He's finished his contract, but he wakes up and he doesn't know what he did for the last 2.5 years.
Yep.
For this
Memory
company.
erased.
It's a construction company.
Other than he knows that he worked for them.
Yeah. And it was part of the contract that he had to have his mind wiped. What he was dealing with was top secret, and they could not allow anybody to know what was going on. You know, for competition reasons, you know. It's kind of a very advanced non-compete clause.
Also, because the government is very police, it's a police government too.
Well, that's
why they're so secret as well.
That's a very important point that creates a departure from the movie that is really, really fascinating. Yes, this is the future. It is a police state, and they are very controlling. But the government is only able to control individuals, not corporations.
Yes, that was a very interesting clause.
Yes.
So they're still trying to keep it on the DL because they don't know, they don't want the police knowing what the company does.
Yeah, because they'll go after the owner of the company if they ever find out what he's up to.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I should spoil that later on or not. But anyway, the main character, I forget his name, I'm terrible with names, he wakes up and doesn't know what he's been doing the last 2.5 years. And he is informed that he can either take, what was it, like 50,000 credits, which sounds like a ridiculously low amount for what he did.
For 2 years of your life,
I suppose in 1953, that, and of course we have no clue what a credit really is.
Yeah.
But, in 1953, that probably sounded like a ton of money.
Yeah.
Today it sounds like chump change.
Yes.
But he can either take that money and walk, or he can take this envelope with some trinkets in it.
Yeah. And they seem like nothing trinkets.
Yeah, it's like a
and
torn
apparently
ticket
this was
stub.
agreed to before his memory wipe.
Yeah.
So, like, he's pissed when he finds out he chose the trinkets and not the money.
But when they told him this was his idea to do it, he said, well, okay.
Yeah.
He didn't know what was going on yet, but he knew that he must have had a good reason for doing this.
So he's trusting the process.
So the moment he walks out of the corporate headquarters, there's the police there.
And they pick him up right away.
Pick him up and want to question him. Well, one of the trinkets becomes useful to escape from the police car and get away from the police, because he knows that they'll not stop until they find out what he was doing for that company.
And he doesn't know, so he legitimately can't tell them, but he's afraid to be
But
taken
they won't
into custody.
Stop at anything to try and find out. So he would probably be killed by them in
the
their
process of
attempts to
questioning.
break his memory. So he escapes, and the story then brilliantly very brilliantly. It's really a mystery story.
Yeah, you're kind of like
Because
piecing
you've
it
got
together.
these things and you don't know what they're for, and he doesn't know what they're for, but then
Yes.
events happen and all of a sudden it becomes apparent what one of the trinkets is for. And gradually things piece together until the end. And to go any further, I would have to spoil.
I know. I don't think you should spoil
I
this
shouldn't
one.
spoil it.
And it's fun because each of these trinkets is just a piece of junk, literally. Like outside of context, useless. Absolutely useless.
But
He's just processing, like, he's going through the process of, okay, what would future me say? Like, if future me knew what was coming up, I gotta just trust and look for the signs. So you can imagine, like, the hyper alert this poor man has to be on at all times, trying to figure out what these trinkets are for.
yeah.
Oh, so interesting.
And it is a mystery. It is very much a science fiction story because the key to the whole mystery is the science behind why he was working for this company.
Yes.
And I have to do kind of a semi-spoilery about, because there's a topic behind this story that
Okay,
is
let's do
really
the
fascinating.
semi-spoiler. Because the process of finding out the trinkets all the way through is a great part of the story that makes it so enjoyable.
But beyond that is the project that he was called in to work on. Remember earlier I said the police can go after individuals, but they can't legally touch corporations.
Unless they're actually doing something illegal.
But even then they go after the individual. They're going after the guy that owns the company.
Yeah.
So this totalitarian police state that they're living in, the only way to fight it is if a corporation is doing something to fight it, because they can remain outside the law
Yes.
and hidden from the police so that they don't find out that they're plotting to overthrow the government.
So the individuals who are overthrowing the government can get arrested, but the corporation, as long as it's still there and still prospering, can just keep rehiring people to be part of this revolution.
And wiping minds to keep the police from ever finding anything
Yep.
out.
Yep. Yes.
So what the thing that instantly hit me is there's a lot of Ayn Rand in the political ideas behind this story. Of the
Very interesting.
corporate individualists fighting the government from
Yes.
controlling them.
Yes. I would agree with that. That's a very good point. I didn't think of it until you said it.
Okay.
Good deal.
That's the first thing that hit me when I came across what this company was actually trying to do, is that it sounded very much like Atlas Shrugged.
Yes. I would agree. Yeah, it's definitely Atlas Shrugged in a lot of respects.
In a way that's less annoying.
Yeah, in a way that it's not one hive mind trying to direct the individuals, like in Ayn Rand. This is like, yes, it's no different than the way we do politics in general. Like, it's like you find the person you're most like-minded with and you vote for them, and then they run the government, whatever kind of thing. It's really no different than that when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's very much the same way that American politics are set up. Including the corporations running everything.
Yeah. Well, except our corporations have taken over without having to start a revolution.
Yeah, no. We are consumerists for sure. So yeah, lots of feelings from this story for me in that regard, because I recognized that right away. And my first response was like...
knee-jerk kill Ayn Rand response.
Ayn Rand is definitely not my favorite person in the world, but I mean, who hasn't thought of that concept before, of the individual, like what being an individual means is really what she brings up.
Well, and
she takes it to extremes in a lot of respects.
I think you have to keep a perspective that the early days of this country, it was the rugged individualist. It was the Davy Crockett going into the frontier on his own.
Yep.
And building his own house, clearing his own land, starting his own farm.
Because
doing
he was
for himself.
evading taxes.
Yeah. Well, there wasn't taxes.
Actually, there was. That's why he decided to run away.
Yeah,
is because he was getting in trouble all the time with the government for tax evasion
there
and all kinds of stuff.
Well, no, it was in the early 1800s. It was a big, big debate whether or not the government could legally start taxing people.
That's true. But he was a con artist.
Yeah.
He was fleeing that. But anyway,
So
I get your point.
gradually, you had the government getting involved in things, taxing people, regulating things, and at the same time, you did have businesses becoming very big. Businesses in control of oil, businesses in control of the railroads,
Monopolizing
and
everything.
the people that the families that owned them just became ridiculously rich. And they were allowed to because we had such an individualist society. There
Yes.
was nothing, the government was formed with the idea of just protecting their shores and leaving everybody to their own selves.
Yeah.
But by the early 1900s, you had a government that was forced to step in and put a lot of controls. You had the people that were forced to form labor unions because of the way that
People were choosing to run
industries
things.
were abusing both the law and the employees. And so you had more government control, and the rugged individualism was now becoming regulated to where you can't do that. And that has continued to increase in our country. In the 1940s, people like Ayn Rand saw that
Yeah.
and saw the danger of a world that was going to become like 1984 or Brave New World, where the people are just drones
Yeah.
following the
They're all
laws and
controlled and
regulations
hyper.
of the government
Yeah,
without
micromanaged.
any ability to think for themselves anymore or do for themselves.
Yep.
And so they started to romanticize this rugged individualist. And that kind of is where we're at today, where
Yeah.
we have people who want to go back to that, but we can't.
And I think it's interesting how that kind of flowed into like a very vigilante style character in action, fantasy, all that kind of
A
stuff.
lot of science fiction heroes
Yeah.
were the guys that
Where
bucked
you're
the
the
system.
you're the vigilante and flowing into that whole concept.
Yeah, and the whole
Batman.
Apple 1984 commercial
Yeah.
of, being different, think different, going against
The grain.
the controls of society, going against the popular wisdom.
Yep.
That has been romanticized and heroicized, especially in science fiction.
Yes. I think my actual first knee-jerk reaction, though, with this story is, with my modern lens, what corporation would help the individual? It's all about the money in our modern age. Back then, it was like, we need the revolution to start, and we are here to start it. Nowadays, it's like, we need the money, so let's make a revolution. Like, that to me was my first knee-jerk reaction, is what corporation would actually do this to help modern man?
Well, a corporation wouldn't do it purely in self-sacrifice.
No.
But there are cases of corporations that had a vision of how they could make money by making people's lives better. Thomas Edison is one of those.
Yeah.
He brought a lot of products into our lives that really revolutionized our lives and revolutionized communications too.
And I think that back then that was probably a legitimate thing, but in modern day, I have so much distrust as a consumer in capitalism.
Yeah, we all do, because we've been burned so bad.
Exactly. So
But
that
you
was
still
my
got-
first thing is like, what corporation? Like, when they start bringing that up, I'm like, oh, really? Really? But then, yes, in context, I was like, I guess back then they probably legitimately thought that people were trying to actually make people's lives better.
Well, but like I say, a corporation will do it if they can profit from making people's lives better and helping people. Like, this would be very controversial, but what's his name that started Tesla?
Oh, Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. He wants to go to Mars. He will profit. If he can make that happen, he will profit from it, but he'll also push mankind and technology and science so far forward by doing that. The scary part is, looking at our society, there's so many of our people that are not ready for that advancement. And that's what I fear. But he is, he's super rich,
Yeah.
but he realizes that all the kinds of science fiction dreams we've had are never going to happen if we wait for the government and special interest groups to clear out of the way and let it happen.
Which is, I think, originally why NASA ended up becoming privatized in the first place.
Exactly.
Is because they realized we don't have the
In
resources
the 1970s,
here.
we
Yeah.
went to the moon and we put Skylab in orbit, and then the rug was pulled out from under it by,
Yep.
by Congress, cutting back, and by all the people screaming that you need to give money to the people and help the people and not spend money on going into outer space.
And without thinking long term that perhaps going to outer space actually can help people.
Yeah. And it has brought us a lot of technologies and a lot of knowledge.
Absolutely.
And giving us access to a lot of information that has really changed us.
Yes. Yes. And it made us understand our own world even better. But yeah, I definitely, that was my first reaction, was like, my distrust of corporations was definitely,
Yeah.
that felt a little unrealistic to me, but I understand in the context that was.
And so that's
the
why
thing.
in the movie they changed that. They took that whole revolution against the government out of the
Okay.
whole story, and it was the guy against the corporation, because that's what we understand. That's what we sympathize with. Is
Yes.
the corporations are just always evil.
Yes. And yeah. So yeah, that definitely sat weird with me. I loved the process of figuring out what the trinkets were. That the whole journey was amazing. Like the whole journey of him trying to figure out what things were. The character of Kelly, is that her name, Kelly?
Yeah.
I think it was Kelly. Yeah, the character of Kelly was interesting. Really liked her incorporation into things. Did not feel like she was a cardboard character, really.
No,
Like, she seemed pretty well developed for how short and how little she was actually involved.
but well, she's one of those interesting K. Dick things where you start out
Having
assuming
one notion.
she's just a secretary.
Yes, you have one
Sitting at a
notion.
desk and saying hello to people.
Yes.
And in the end,
She has more than
It's
meets
all
the
different.
eye. Yes, she is more than meets the eye, and I definitely appreciated that character existing, and the developments in
Yeah.
that situation. I loved the last line of the story. Will not spoil it for you. Loved that whole last line where he's just like, "All right, this is it, mic drop." So that was fantastic. And basically the whole last like small stanza, really enjoyed that. Definitely I got really hardcore like beginnings of not Minority Report. Why, I almost said Paranormal Activity.
no.
No, that was not correct. I just was watching all those recently because, spooky season. But I got the beginnings of Minority Report. I got the hard Minority Report vibes with this one.
Yeah.
So I really
And like
appreciated
we've seen
that
with Philip K.
foreshadowing.
Dick, he does repeat himself a lot. But
Yes.
he's the master of being able to take the same story and rewrite it into something completely different that continues to blow your mind.
Yes, and that was a really, for sure. I really enjoyed that. I don't know Philip K. Dick's actual written version of Minority Report. I have not read it. I know we're getting to it.
The line.
But I have seen the film, and I enjoyed that film immensely. It's one of my
Yeah, I
favorite
liked it
sci-fi
too.
films.
It's a very good film.
Yes, it is fantastic. So having that, like, I usually try to go into things as clean slate as possible, but there are just some things that are so pop culture that you don't have a lot of, like, you just have those preconceived notions.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Dracula.
the things that are pop culture, I'm usually under a rock about, but like Minority Report, which most people probably know of, but maybe not everyone's seen, like compared to like Star Wars or whatever. I don't know. I feel like I'm so ass backwards.
Have you seen Blade Runner?
Yes.
Okay.
I've seen Blade Runner. Not the most recent one, though.
No, I haven't seen that one
Yeah,
either.
I haven't seen that one. So I've seen Blade Runner,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen, my parents were really into sci-fi, so a lot of those movies and things, I knew those movies. But, like,
Yeah.
the Universal Monster movies, not something my family was into. You know?
How
Like,
can you not?
I don't know. I don't know why my family was like
course,
that.
It was different for me growing up in the 70s. Okay, you had network television. You didn't have cable. You didn't have
Yeah.
HBO. You didn't have Netflix. None of those things existed. You had movie theaters. The movies would come and go, and then you had to wait years before they would come to TV, and they'd be premiered on Sunday night on ABC or something.
And that's kind of how I was raised.
Oh,
Well, we didn't get a TV.
but I mean, a lot of the horror movies that came out in the 1970s were rated R, so they couldn't be shown on network TV.
Oh, interesting.
So the only horror movies you had were the old horror movies, the Universal and the Hammer horror films, and they were mostly only shown around Halloween.
Yeah.
So Halloween, you had Frankenstein. While you did have Saturday nights, you had creature features that would play all the old Universal movies. So it was on every Saturday night. I'm not sure if Creature Features is still going. Sven Gulli is still around on MeTV.
Okay.
You can
Yes,
still
I
see
saw
him
it. Yes,
on
that's still on
Saturday nights.
MeTV.
He's still doing that. But that's the way horror movies were when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You were everything you watched was made before 1970.
Yeah. So a lot of my childhood was like, we didn't own. I always say I was like around 15 when we finally like had a TV hooked up to the antenna. Like my parents had one in their room to watch the news, but we didn't watch TV. Like my family just read a lot, and
Nothing
we
wrong
rented
with that.
movies
Yeah.
from Blockbuster. And that's what our TV was used for, was the movies we rented. So we had things like Minority Report. Oh, and my parents would let us come into their room and watch the old Doctor Who, and we would watch Star Trek.
The great ones.
Yeah. And I love Voyager. I don't care. Captain Janeway was my captain. Anyway, because I grew up with her. But, yeah, so that's how I got introduced to more sci-fi stuff. Because my parents were, sci-fi. They loved that kind of thing. They were they were nerds.
Yeah.
But we also had religious. My parents were a lot more conservative back then than they are now. And we had religious reasons that my parents were afraid to show me a lot of old monster movies and things like that, because those concepts were either had demonic things going on in them or had like a spiritual element that they were concerned about. Now they're like, whatever, read whatever, think for yourself. Like, that was silly of us. We just wanted to protect your innocence when you were younger, sort of thing, which is understandable.
Yeah. They did have all those old horror movies. Yes, they did have Christian elements to them. The monsters were in league with the devil. Even the werewolves and the vampires, they were all in line with the devil. But it didn't glamorize them.
No, and
They were monsters.
And that's what my
It was
parents
clear
realized
that
when we were older.
You don't be like Dracula. You don't be like the Wolfman. You be like the good guys that kill them.
Yes. And so that stuff was just, like, not accessible to me when I was younger. Just because either the family wasn't interested or my parents were trying to protect us from those things. But, like, deeply philosophical things like Minority Report, those were, like, we had amazing family discussions at dinner after watching that kind of movie and those kinds of things. So those are the things that I'm used to. So reading sci-fi classics like we've been reading, especially this one, really brings up a lot of those conversations for me. Because they were a part of my growing up and my mind development at the time. But it's funny because sci-fi was not the type of book that I would have chosen for myself when I was younger. I would have usually gone towards fantasy, because fantasy was something we often shied away from when I was younger because of the magic element, and that being like, oh, magic and witchcraft is evil in most cases, and the glamorization of that. But I tend to like that thing.
I feel like most people of your generation are more into fantasy than science fiction.
Yeah.
And mainly because of Harry Potter, frankly.
Yes.
Harry Potter and
Harry
the Twilight
Potter was
series.
like people's entryway into loving reading for a lot of my
they're
generation.
coming into the genres through fantasy.
The regeneration of Lord of the Rings.
I think that has a lot to do with why people pick up these old Philip K. Dick or Robert Heinlein stories, and they don't get it because it's not what they're familiar with. It's not how they entered the genre.
Yes.
Where I entered the genre through Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Robert Heinlein, and so I totally get that stuff.
Yes, and I think that's what's so great for me is like now that I'm getting into it, it's like, oh, this is all stuff that I'm actually familiar with, and I didn't realize it because I had no idea. Like, I had completely forgotten that Minority Report was even a PKD story.
Yeah.
But that's something that I didn't think of as a kid. You know, you don't worry about that kind of thing.
The amazing thing, though, is that Paycheck was released only like a couple years after Minority Report.
Yeah.
There were a
But it
number of
predates
there were a
Minority
number of
Report
Philip
in this,
K.
as a
Dick
story.
stories. There were a number of Philip K. Dick based movies that were released right after Minority Report, and so it's kind of amazing if you were watching that. It's kind of amazing you didn't pick up that your parents didn't pick up Paycheck.
Yeah, I don't know, and it was
'cause
very
is
like
very
touch and
much
go.
the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's is it Ben Affleck and Uma Thurman in it?
Ooh.
It's
nice
a good
cast.
movie. It's a good movie. I think it's very well done.
I have to watch it now. Now that I've read Paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just kind of funny because a lot of these things are like, oh, this reminds me of this, and you're like, yeah, that's based off the book. Oh, and usually it's kind of funny because my parents would be like, oh, we're gonna read the book first before we watch the movie. That was the kind of family we were. So it's just kind of funny the things that we knew and didn't know, and the things that, for some reason, like things that I'm like completely under a rock about, and things that I'm not. So.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, back to the story. Fantastic read. Definitely get
it's
those
a top
Minority. Yeah. Definitely get those like early Minority Report vibes from this one. Really appreciated that.
Mm-hmm.
I just loved how everything panned out.
Mm-hmm. And I love I feel the story is better than the movie Paycheck and better than Minority Report.
For how short it is too. That's amazing.
Yeah. Philip K. Dick is an amazing writer, and this is a really well done, tight, awesome story with
And
a
no
lot of
holes. To have
imagination
that many
behind
moving
it.
parts in the story, and
Yeah.
there's no holes.
Yeah.
There's nothing amiss. Everything's just real sealed up, real nice.
And did you figure out the mystery early on?
Yes, I did. I had an inkling, but you know me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really good at piecing things together.
We're gonna find one that beats you one of these
Yes,
days.
I did. Yes, I did figure out the twist early on. The mystery of what each of the items was is what I ended up focusing on more because I knew that had to
that
come
was the
into
real
play
mystery.
later. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh,
why
I thought
he
you were
chose
talking
them.
about the twist at the end.
No.
Oh, okay. I figured that out real early on that with the Kelly character.
Yeah, well, you kind of know something of how it ends is going to happen early on, that it must.
Yeah. I started
But-
piecing things together a little bit with no, that was more of a mystery to me.
Okay.
The trinkets. So
Yeah.
yes, that was fun.
Mm-hmm.
That one was a challenge and I really liked it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was great too.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, go find it. Go read it.
Paycheck. It's available. It's been anthologized a lot. I have it in this, which I think this is actually out of print now, but
Okay.
you can get this used all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I believe I got my copy at Half Price Books.
Woo!
So go out there
Half
and you'll
Price.
find Paycheck in a book somewhere on the bookshelves, either used or new somewhere.
Yep. It's definitely out there. And this is one of his more popular ones anyway.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, it is one of his better known stories. They named the whole
Yeah.
collection after that one story.
It's
That's because
extremely accessible.
this was published right after the movie came out.
Yeah.
So of course they used
Of course.
that story as the title
Of course.
to cash in on that.
Yep.
At least they didn't put
It's just good advertising and marketing.
picture from the movie on the cover of this.
I hate when they do that.
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah,
feature
the
film
cover
version.
The illustration they do is from Paycheck.
Oh,
There's
that's
all
cool.
the trinkets
Yep.
around the guy's head.
Yes.
If you can see the illustration, that is for the story Paycheck.
Yep. It's a good one.
Yep.
So go find it. Go read it. And come back to us. Tell us what you
and
think.
is Philip K. Dick ever going to trip himself up and write a stinker of a story?
Yeah. I don't know.
That has become the question.
Yeah,
and
the
quest.
challenge is, are any of them not a telltale, top tail?
Well, there are
Telltale
some that
top tail.
didn't quite make top tail,
That's
but they were
true.
still really good.
Yeah. So,
But every author writes something that you read and you just go, eh.
yeah. So we're waiting. We're waiting for that
Yeah,
one
we're
to see
waiting
if it
for that one.
happens. But
Will it ever?
come back and find out.
Yeah, keep coming back and watching these videos. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any of them. There's a little bell that'll send you notifications if you click it of when we release these videos, each of these videos, and many of them are going to be Philip K. Dick videos, so you'll be able
Yes.
to find out if we ever come across that really bad Philip K. Dick story.